Hi everyone, so for the first lab, we're just going to look at the human torso model and understand important structures within our body and the general orientation of where structures are relative to other structures and the anatomical positions of the structures themselves. So starting off right up here, we have the brain. Gonna move down in the neck region. The first structure we see here, this blue cartilaginous structure, is the larynx. It's also known as our voice box. The larynx also has respiratory function. So right here, larynx. Moving down, we see our thyroid. This whole structure right here is our thyroid. The thyroid has endocrine functions. It makes thyroid hormone, which also helps with metabolism. So this whole structure right here is thyroid. Now, if you move a little more inferiorly, we see another cartilaginous structure that seems like it has little rings to it. This right here is our trachea. And the trachea has respiratory functions, and it's also the airway. It's where air passes to get to our lungs. So right here is trachea. This right here is our jugular vein. And this right here is our common carotid artery. Jugular vein, common carotid. And again, if we're remembering our directional anatomical terms, this whole region is the right, this whole region is the left. So this would be our right jugular vein, the blue structure, right jugular vein, and this would be our right common carotid artery. Same thing over here, the blue structure, left jugular vein, and left common carotid artery. So what we've done here is we've moved from our neck region down to our thorax, or just general chest region. So the first two structures that we can immediately see are our lungs. This right here is our right lung. This right here is the left lung. Another way to tell this is the right lung, besides just its anatomical position, let's say I give you this, just the lung isolated. So the right lung has 3 lobes, 1, 2, and 3, separated by 2 fissures, 1 and 2. This fissure right here is called our horizontal fissure. Again, it looks super horizontal. Down here is our oblique fissure. It's at an angle. So horizontal fissure and oblique fissure, separating the lung into the upper lobe, middle lobe, and lower lobe. And once again, because this is our right lung, if I, let's say, label this, you would say this would be the right middle lobe of the lung. So that entire sentence or the entire phrase would be necessary for whole credit. Now looking at our left lung, the left lung only has 2 lobes. So it has an upper and a lower lobe. Upper and lower lobe of the left lung separated by the oblique fissure. So upper lobe, lower lobe separated by the oblique fissure. Now if we're moving a little more deeper, the next structure that we can see is the heart. This whole structure right here is the heart. Vessels coming from the heart. Right here is our superior vena cava. It drains blood from all of the upper extremities and takes it back to the heart. Deoxygenated blood back to the heart. So superior vena cava. Before it branches out even further, we have this little trunk. So this would be the right brachiocephalic vein, just this little area before it branches. This right here would be the left brachiocephalic vein before it branches again. So superior vena cava, right brachiocephalic vein, left brachiocephalic vein. Now the brachiocephalic vein divides into the subclavian vein and the internal jugular vein. So this would be the right subclavian vein, right internal jugular vein. left subclavian vein, left internal jugular vein. So once again, superior vena cava, brachiocephalic vein, subclavian vein, internal jugular vein. Now if we look right here, this big red vessel coming from the heart is our aorta. So the aorta has 3 branches. The right brachiocephalic trunk, again, before it branches further, just this little area. So we've got the aorta, the right brachiocephalic trunk, the right subclavian artery. As you can see, that red little structure splitting from here. And right here, you can see the common carotid artery, So on the left side, you can see that we don't have a brachiocephalic trunk. So here you see the left subclavian artery, and the left common carotid artery in red, left common carotid. Okay, and now if we take the heart out too and look at a deeper plane of section, here we can see the esophagus. So the esophagus is posterior to our trachea. Remember, this is the trachea. Up here, we mentioned that earlier. So here is also the trachea, except it's bifurcating, it's splitting. And posterior to the trachea, all the way down further, is the esophagus. So here, if we continue on with the trachea, we see the trachea bifurcating, so it's splitting. Right here, the first split right here would be our primary bronchi. So the trachea splits into first primary bronchi. So this whole section would be the primary bronchi. And right here, primary bronchi. And that splits into secondary bronchi, bronchioles, and furthermore into tertiary bronchioles. So primary bronchi, secondary bronchioles, tertiary bronchioles. Over here too, primary bronchi, secondary bronchioles, and anything further that you can't see here, but we can see in here, are tertiary bronchioles. So that's the entire thorax region of what you need to be responsible for in terms of material. There's one more thing. This muscular flap right here is the diaphragm. And we'll see better views of it in later sections. So here we've moved a little more inferiorly. So we went from our chest region to our abdomen. And once again, I want to point out the diaphragm right here. The diaphragm. Maybe if I bring this a little more up, we can see right here the diaphragm. And it continues all the way around. So our diaphragm is what separates our chest and abdominal cavities. Diaphragm. So now that we're in the abdomen region, first thing we see over here is our liver. So our liver is also separated into 2 lobes, just like the lungs. So we've got the right lobe, which is much bigger, and the left lobe. So right lobe and left lobe. And from this view, you can also see the screen structure right here. That would be our gallbladder. So right lobe, left lobe, gallbladder. Now, we're gonna look at the liver from a different view. So once again, right lobe, left lobe, gallbladder. So this is still my right lobe. This is still my left lobe. But once we look at it in this view, things get a little different. I'm gonna move the model just a little bit so you guys get a better look. So what we have, again, is still our right lobe and our left lobe. But when you look at it from this view, there's 2 more lobes that we can see. So right here, this lobe is going to be our caudate lobe, And this lobe near our proximal to the gallbladder this lobe right here is going to be the quadrate lobe. Quadrate lobe. So the quadrate lobe is proximal to the gallbladder, and this little lobe here is the caudate lobe. In an anatomical position, the caudate lobe is back, so it's like caudate, like a little tail. So once again, let's review the liver. We've got the right lobe, left lobe, gallbladder. Look at it from this perspective, and we have still the right lobe, still the left lobe, our quadrate lobe proximal to the gallbladder, and our caudate lobe. So now I'm just gonna get rid of the liver and let's look at the other internal anatomy that we see here. So I'm not sure if you guys are getting a decent look at this, but right connecting this tube right here, continuous tube, and it comes down here is our esophagus, the muscular tube where food passes, and that attaches to our stomach. So esophagus attaching to our stomach. Now if we move our stomach, we can see the beginning of our small intestines. This tube right here would be the beginning of our small intestines. So if our stomach is attached back up in there, and we look at it from, this point of view, we can see how the stomach is attached to that tube right there. And that will be the beginning of our small intestines. So stomach, small intestines right here. And then everything else you see, all of these intestines are also our small intestines. So the small intestines are divided into three: the duodenum, jejunum, and the ileum. So all of this, small intestines. Another thing we see right here is this yellow fatty structure. So it's filled with adipose tissue, and that over here, all of this is called the greater omentum. Another thing to point out is surrounding our small intestines, or around it, is our large intestine. All of this, the large intestine, or the colon, whichever you prefer. So we just went over the stomach, the large intestine, small intestine, and the greater omentum. If we're looking deeper to the stomach, so I'm just gonna move the stomach away, we see a couple of different structures. Let's start right here. This purple, dark purple structure is the spleen, and it has immune functions. If we're looking a little more medially, this structure right here is our pancreas. All of that is our pancreas. So two structures to remember here: spleen and pancreas. Also, deeper to it, what we see is the diaphragm. All this muscular tissue that's arranged in a plethora of ways is our diaphragm. Again, separating the thorax and the abdominal cavity. Diaphragm. So now we get a deeper look within this cavity. So the first two structures that are very prominent, once again, are our kidneys. So this right here would be our right kidney, and this right here is the left kidney. The left kidney, again, is not supposed to be confused with the spleen. So this right here is our spleen. We only have one, versus our left kidney. Directly superior to the kidney, so right on top of it, are these two structures, 1 and 2. These are our adrenal glands, or the suprarenal glands. So adrenal gland or suprarenal gland right there. This would be our left adrenal gland or suprarenal gland. This right here would be our right adrenal gland or suprarenal gland. Going back to the kidneys, we see a tube that is directly attached to it. So this tube right here, these are our ureters. So we have two of those. This would be our right ureter. This would be our left ureter. Now, if we look a little more inferiorly, we see that our ureters are a really, really long tube that are connected to something else. I believe that's a good view. So this is a continuation of our ureter, and they go all the way down and back, and they attach to our bladder. So this right here is our bladder. So ureter, or left ureter, attaching right there to our bladder. So this whole thing right here is our bladder. And you see this structure right here is going to be our urethra. Urethra, where all urine is expelled. Urethra. So ureter, bladder, urethra. We also have a few vessels in this region, a few vessels. So right here is a continuation of our aorta. So all of this is still our aorta. And the aorta divides into the left and right common iliac arteries. Let's just say iliac arteries. So any of this would be our iliac artery. Iliac artery. There's specific terms, but right now I will not require you to know them. So if this is pinned, that would be our left iliac artery. This is pinned, this would be our right iliac artery. We also have the inferior vena cava. So we already went over the superior vena cava. This right here would be the inferior vena cava, which also drains into our right and left iliac veins.